Well, here we are at Bresham Gardens. This is actually the summer garden, and we've put a few cornice in here, but it's really pretty undeniable that the most effective plant, perhaps of all in the winter time, is Cornus midwinter fire. And when you see the new shoots just beginning here, you know it's time to cut back. So we'll go and have a look in the winter garden itself and start cutting back. Well, this is quite a big job to do this, but and in fact I'm reluctant really to cut it back, and because it's been so good for the past year. But to get that colour, we really do have to cut back the cornice at a certain level, and best done by hand really than a machine, because you can see exactly where you're pruning and what you're pruning. And not to go into too much detail with that, but you can see where I'm pruning too. And this will be the next thing. In fact, these beds really don't look very attractive. In fact, all the perennials have been cut back, and it's a bit up and down. There's a bit of weed that wants doing. That's typical for this time of the year for spring, because that's when all the jobs want doing at once. But if we go across from this area, and we know we've got work to do here, replanting and so on, plenty of time for that. But just have a look over here, because although it's time it was cut back, just look at this scene that you've got between the cornice, magic flame there, and this is Miscanthus midwinter, Miscanthus midwinter fire. This is morning light. Both begin with an M, you see. It's time to cut that back too, but you see that's one that stands up very well against the weather. It's variegated foliage, so you don't need to do much for it to be attractive. As soon as it starts growing, it's going to look pretty good. But time to cut that back and the cornice back, then you just have to wait for the new growth. Well, now you're getting a view across the winter garden there, and you can see all the components that make the picture. In the distance there you've got a betula, that's Greyswood ghost, and really almost ghost-like, particularly if it's a foggy winter morning. Then you come forward from that and you see the shapes of the conifers and the colours and the cornice. And we're now in early spring and the heathers are just about to go over, but we've got a few perennials coming up and a few grasses. So it's been a long time, but we have really enjoyed the winter garden, and all gardens really should have some feature in it that have winter interest. I've had rather a bad press lately, and I can't see why actually, because particularly the Ericacarnia types, they will take you know, an alkaline soil. They're very adaptable as long as they're more or less in sun, then they get good flower. That one's called Ice Princess, and it really has made a wonderful carpet against the golden conifer, against the grass over there, and it lasts for several weeks in flower. It's also, of course, very attractive to bees, so the earliest bees will come out and start enjoying that before anything else almost. Now this is literally one I planted earlier, and it's a wonderful betula. You see how it's bark, it's got several stems. Mount Apoensis, which actually comes from China, and we now have them in our gardens too. It's fairly slow growing for a betula, but it adds so much to the picture, and of course you limit up so they can actually look through it. And if you look in the distance, you can see the heathers, the conifers, and the daffodils really showing up at this time, towards the beginning of spring, really. Well, this is one of my favorite spring, late winter cherries. Not one that's widely grown, or sometimes when it is grown, it's grown as a container plant. It makes quite a good plant in a container. It's Prunus incisor, the spring cherry from Japan, and very dainty really. It's not like some of the hybrids which are verging on the vulgar, let's say, perhaps. But if you limit up again when it gets older, you can look underneath it. You can see this leucojum here. This is the late sort of snowdrop. It would have more flowers if it was in full sun, but it grows quite good shade. And look at all the foliage on that. That's called Gravetide Giant. And just in the front of here, you've got a combination of the conifers and the acorus. The acorus is the golden grass-like plant, and then the foliage of the Microbiota decusata, bit of a name, isn't it? But that came from Siberia. So it's all about using plants at different levels, different heights, different seasons to try and create combinations for any time of the year. If you bring things down a scale or two, just look at the Helleborus. Of course, these Helleborus are of one type and they've seeded around a bit, but you've got the Scilla siberica in the foreground, the blue against those. It really does make and set them off quite nicely. If you had a patch of these in your garden, you'd be quite happy with it. Here we're not altogether happy, but you can see the different colours that are involved in it. And you've got to be sure that they don't keep seeding down so they get too thick, so we have to thin them out. And I'm thinking about putting a few daffodils in the background perhaps for next year. But the beauty of these plants is they last for such a long time. Look at the individual plants, individual flowers as much as the overall plant. If you look through this sort of scene, if you like, through there, you can look at the Erica here. This is a Dahliensis type called Kramer's Rote, which is very good. It's been here now 15 years. It needs a bit more light than it gets. But look at the daffodils in here too. This is February Gold, which has come up and still flowering well into March. And if you put that as a drift, really, than just a patch here and there, then it really joins the eye, if you like, in looking towards that silver birch. And also the cornice behind. So we've tried to create something here which really gives you quite a diversity of plants, but the one thing that really makes it is the cornice in the center. Well, for those who like to know the correct name for things, this is Sequoia Dendrin Gigantium Pendulum. A rather effective and rather lovely form too, although you may not think so, of the giant redwood of California. And here, this particular one is deciding what to do. Is it going to go up into the sky, which many of them do, but no, it doesn't really want to do that. But I have a bit of a dilemma because it's taking up so much space now. You can see it's our dinosaur really in the winter garden. But you can see that it takes up a lot of space. So do I keep it or do we have to take it out? We've got another one next to it, which is going skyward. Anyway, that decision doesn't have to be made for a little while, but something to think about.